Somewhere in the Persian Gulf, a weapon is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It isn't firing, it isn't moving, it's just sitting in the silt 60 feet below the surface, listening. And right now, that weapon, a steel cylinder that cost less than a used jet ski, is doing more damage to the Iranian economy than every American carrier strike group in the region combined. Not because it's exploding, because it might. I was at a petrol station on a Tuesday morning, just filling up, nothing going on, radio on low, and the price on the pump changed while the nozzle was still in my hand. 4 cents, just like that. I remember standing there for a second, not really thinking about anything. And then it landed, somewhere 7,000 miles away. I note a piece of steel buried in mud is reaching through the floor of the Persian Gulf and pulling money out of my wallet. Not because it detonated, because the people whose job it is to move oil through that corridor have decided the risk of it detonating is worth more than the value of what they're carrying. That thought arrived while I was standing on a forecourt watching numbers change on a pump. I sat in the car for a while before I drove anywhere. We have been told a story about modern naval warfare for 40 years. The story goes like this. The side with the most advanced technology wins. The side with the laser guidance and the stealth hull and the $2 billion destroyer and the vertical launch cells and the Aegis radar system. That side owns the water. Right now, those destroyers are sitting outside the Strait of Hormuz. Not moving, the most advanced naval force in human history, effectively stationary, while a corridor carrying 20% of the world's crude oil sits mined and bleeding. And if you think that's because the Iranian Air Force scared them off, you've been reading the wrong history books. But look, I want to be upfront about where I stand on this before we go further because it shapes everything I'm about to tell you. I think what is happening at the Strait of Hormuz right now is not a failure of American naval capability. I think it is the most deliberate, cold-blooded economic operation in modern military history. I think the United States Navy is allowing Iran's own weapons to function as an American blockade, without a single American ship firing a single American shot. I think the delay is not reluctance. I think it is the operation. I'll show you why I land there, but you should know where I'm standing. To understand the trap Iran walked into, you have to understand the weapon they used to set it. The EM-52, a steel cylinder roughly 3 feet long, buried in the silt of the seafloor. It emits nothing. No radar return, no heat signature, no acoustic noise. It just sits there with a hydrophone sensor, listening for the acoustic signature of a ship's propeller. When the right signature passes overhead, a solid fuel rocket motor fires a 308-pound warhead upward through the water column at 260 feet per second. It punches through the hull from directly beneath. You cannot armor the bottom of a ship against a rocket traveling that fast. You cannot detect a weapon that emits nothing. And you cannot insure a tanker against a weapon that cannot be found. That last sentence is where the actual story begins. Before I go further, let me explain something, because this concept is the entire engine of what follows. There is an idea in political science called the Overton window. It describes the range of actions a society considers acceptable at a given moment. The window moves. What was unthinkable 10 years ago becomes standard practice today. Not because the action changed, but because the framing around it shifted. Here is what that means for Hormuz. A full naval blockade of a sovereign nation is an act of war. It always has been. If the United States Navy had sailed into the Persian Gulf and announced it was closing Iranian shipping lanes, every government on earth would have a position on that within 48 hours. But Iran laid the mines. Iran closed the corridor. Iran did it to themselves. The Overton window didn't move because of anything America did. It moved because Iran handed America a set of conditions in which the most aggressive possible economic outcome, total Iranian oil revenue collapse, is now happening without American fingerprints on the mechanism. The Navy doesn't have to blockade Iran. The mines are the blockade. The reason this matters here is that it means the Navy's decision to wait is not passivity. It is the active management of a situation that is already producing the desired result, and producing it in a way that no international body can formally object to. Iran maintains an estimated 5,000 to 6,000 naval mines, contact mines, bottom mines, influence mines, rising mines. The cost per unit on the low end is $1,500. One M08 contact mine, the kind that detonated beneath the USS Samuel B. Roberts in 1988, cost $1,500 and ripped a hole 15 to 25 feet wide through the hull, broke the keel, flooded 2 engine rooms, wounded 10 sailors, and took 13 months and $89.5 million to repair. A cost exchange ratio of 1 to 1.3 million. Let that sit for a second. 1 to 1.3 million. No weapon in the history of warfare produces that ratio. A piece of steel with an explosive charge designed during the American Civil War still owns the most asymmetric cost ratio in modern combat. If you are a Pentagon accountant, that number is the nightmare that keeps the whole building awake. If you are an Iranian commander looking across the water at a $2 billion destroyer, that number is the only viable sentence in your entire strategic vocabulary. But here is the piece that changes the equation entirely. Iran did not mine Hormuz to stop the Americans. Iran mined Hormuz to hold the global energy supply hostage, and in doing so they built their own cage and handed the key to the people they were trying to trap. Now here is the thing I keep running into that seems like it shouldn't be true, but is. The United States Navy can clear the Strait of Hormuz, not theoretically, practically, right now, with systems that are already built, already deployed, already proven. The ALMDS, Airborne Laser Mine Detection, mounted beneath an MH-60S Seahawk helicopter, fires pulses of LiDAR light downward into the water column and builds a 3-dimensional map of everything near the surface, including mines, without putting anything in the water. For the mines the laser can't reach, the bottom mines sitting in the mud 40 feet down, an unmanned surface vessel called the CUSV tows a side-scan sonar into the minefield, controlled by a single operator at a safe distance. The LCS never enters the field. For the influence mines, the smart ones that trigger on magnetic signature and propeller noise, the same unmanned vessel tows a cable that mimics the acoustic and magnetic profile of a 300,000-ton supertanker. The mine detects the signal, its triggers align, it detonates against a cable. The mine destroys itself against a target that does not exist. And for the mines that refuse to fire against a decoy, the Navy deploys Archer Fish, a small expendable underwater drone on a fiber optic cable carrying sonar and camera. The operator watches real-time video. The drone swims to the mine. The operator presses a button. Shaped charge. Done. 4 systems, 4 steps. Find, scan, trick, kill. 0 sailors in the water. No other Navy on Earth has all 4 of these integrated into a single deployable package. If you are half listening to this while doing something else, I need you to actually look at the screen for this next part. Because this is the piece that reframes everything I've just described. The question is not whether the Navy can clear the mine. The question is why a Navy with that capability is choosing not to use it yet. And the answer is not what most analysts say it is. I'll be honest. When I started pulling the research for this video, I was going to build the argument around the technology. 4 systems, 4 steps. Here is how they work. Here is why nobody else has them. That was the video I thought I was making. But at about 1 in the morning, I found a targeting sequence document from the operations against Iranian naval infrastructure. And I had to stop, go back, and rebuild the entire argument from a different direction, because the sequencing of what was destroyed and when told a different story than the one I was going to tell. So we are going somewhere else now. If you sweep mines while Iran is still manufacturing and laying new ones, you mop the floor while the faucet runs. You clear 100, they deploy 200. The corridor never opens. The operation never ends. The Navy did not begin clearing the strait because the Navy was busy shutting off the faucet first. Operation Epic Fury dismantled the Iranian mine-laying infrastructure with a specificity that most coverage missed entirely. 26 mine-laying vessels destroyed, 16 intercepted at sea, 10 more destroyed at their berths. Mine storage facilities on Karg Island, production facilities inside Iran, the depot network, systematically in sequence before a single mine-hunting drone entered the water. The mines currently on the floor of the Strait of Hormuz are the last mines Iran will ever deploy. There are no replacement vessels to lay new ones. There are no factories producing new ones. There are no depots holding reserves. Every mine cleared from this point forward is a mine that will never be replaced. But here is the variable that most analysts miss entirely. Every day those mines sit on the seafloor, Iran bleeds. Iran normally exports 1.4 million barrels of crude oil per day. Nearly all of it passes through Hormuz. Since the mines went down, Iranian crude loadings have collapsed towards zero. Not because American ships are blocking Iranian tankers, because tanker operators worldwide will not send vessels into a corridor where the insurance premium alone exceeds the profit margin of the cargo. Iran built a weapon to close the strait to everyone else. It closed the strait to Iran. I want to name the real villain here because it is not the one most people point to. Now, it is not the Iranian commander who ordered the mines laid. He was operating from a logic that was internally coherent. Asymmetric cost ratio, geographic choke point, insurance market vulnerability. These are real strategic levers, and he pulled them correctly. The villain is the efficiency trap. Modern navies spent 40 years optimizing for peer-competitor conflict. $2 billion destroyers, stealth aircraft, precision-guided munitions, vertical launch cells that can hit a target 300 miles away, all of it designed to fight the Soviet Navy, the Chinese Navy, a force with comparable hardware and comparable doctrine. And then a $1,500 piece of steel in the mud made all of it tactically irrelevant in a 21-mile corridor. Not because the technology failed, because the technology was never designed for this problem. The destroyer cannot sweep a minefield. The stealth aircraft cannot find a passive weapon. The vertical launch cell cannot kill something that emits no signal. The $2 billion hull is the thing the $1,500 weapon was designed to destroy. The efficiency trap is not a new concept. It is as old as warfare. You optimize for the last threat, and the next threat arrives in a form your optimization cannot process. What is new is the cost ratio. 1 to 1.3 million means the asymmetry doesn't require parity of resources. It doesn't even require competence at scale. It requires a production line that can manufacture steel cylinders at $1,500 a unit and a geography that channels every high-value target through a 6 nautical mile ribbon. Iran had both. This channel is not for people who want the comfortable version of how modern warfare works. It is for people willing to follow the logic to where it actually leads, even when where it leads is uncomfortable. If that is Untold, you are in the right place. Here is what I could not shake after I followed this all the way through. The USS Tripoli, with an amphibious assault ship carrying up to 20 F-35B stealth fighters and 2,500 Marines, is currently transiting toward the Middle East. When it arrives, It provides the protective bubble the mine hunting package requires to operate. Fighter cover overhead, destroyers screening the flanks. The LCS ships can focus entirely on clearance without being exposed. The Navy is not waiting for a technology window. It is waiting for the economic collapse to reach a specific depth before it offers the exit. See. Think about what that means. The mines will be cleared. The technology works, the faucet is shut, the protective bubble is coming. Clearance is not in question. What is in question is what the strait looks like after, because a strait cleared under these conditions, with Iranian naval infrastructure ash, Iranian oil revenue at zero, Iranian mine production eliminated, is not a return to the status quo. It is the opening of a negotiation conducted entirely on American terms, in which Iran's only remaining leverage was already neutralized by the weapon Iran laid with its own hands. The mine did not just close the strait, the mine transferred control of the moment of reopening to the side that can afford to wait. And I almost wish I had not followed this logic to where it goes, because once you see the clearance operation as the opening move of a post-mine political settlement rather than the resolution of a tactical problem, you cannot go back to the version where this is just a story about unmanned robots and laser helicopters. You are stuck with the larger frame, just like I am. Save this video. The next time someone describes the Strait of Hormuz situation as a standoff or a stalemate, come back to the moment where we talked about who controls the timing of reopening, because that is the sentence that reframes everything else. And it reads differently the second time through. There is a question this video opened that I cannot answer here, and I want to name it honestly rather than pretend it resolves cleanly. If the Navy clears the strait on the schedule and terms I've described, and the post-mine settlement produces a Persian Gulf realigned around American strategic priorities, what does that establish as precedent for the next time a weaker power reaches for the asymmetric lever? Does it deter the next mine layer, or does it teach the next mine layer to be patient enough to wait out the economic siege? That question needs its own video. I am not ready to answer it yet. Share this with someone who still thinks this is a story about robots versus mines, because the hardware is almost beside the point. The real architecture here is economic, and the most dangerous weapon in the Persian Gulf right now is not the EM-52 sitting in the silt. It is the insurance actuary in London deciding what the corridor is worth. The EM-52 is still there. Are you still listening? Still waiting for a propeller signature that will trigger a rocket it was never going to need to fire to win. Because the market already flinched. The strait did not close by fire, it closed by the credible possibility of fire. And that is a different kind of weapon entirely, a weapon that works whether it detonates or not. A weapon whose greatest effect is the uncertainty it leaves behind, even after the last one is cleared from the seafloor, even after the factories are ash, even after the ships that laid them are at the bottom. The physical minefield ends when the last mine is destroyed. The psychological minefield does not have an end condition. And that is the question I want you to sit with, not who cleared the mines, not when, not how, but what it means that a $1,500 piece of steel can permanently alter the risk calculus of a 21-mile corridor, not for a year, not for a decade, but for every tanker captain who will ever transit that water for the rest of their career. The mine changed the strait not by closing it, by making it the kind of place that can be closed. Tell me in the comments, do you think the psychological minefield outlasts the physical one? Because I think the answer to that question determines whether what we are watching right now is a temporary crisis or a permanent restructuring of how energy moves through this part of the world. I want to know where you land on that.